Greetings to you, respected viewers and subscribers. Ruslan Belov is back in touch with you again. Today we have a huge volume of information on the agenda, touching upon both the tense geopolitical situation in the Middle East and a detailed analysis of the situation on the fronts of the special military operation. A lot of news has accumulated. It is diverse. There are positive moments, alarming signals, and global political statements that could fundamentally change the balance of power in the world. So sit back comfortably, and let's sort through all this chaos of events, in order, thoroughly and without haste. We will begin our review today, perhaps, with the hottest region on the planet at the moment, the situation unfolding around the Islamic Republic of Iran and the strategically important Strait of Hormuz. I will outline what is happening there in just a few words, although the situation is changing rapidly. We are observing a de facto blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. If you look at marine traffic maps, you will see simply a colossal accumulation of merchant vessels and tankers clustered to the right of the entrance to the strait and directly within the waters of the Persian Gulf. The Iranian side is taking a tough stance and is practically letting no one through this artery. There is an important nuance here. Technically, the shipping companies themselves might have risked passing through, but economics intervened. Insurance companies, having assessed the risks, have hiked rates to the skies. Insurance now costs about 3% of the full value of the vessel. These are enormous sums, making the voyage unprofitable. Former and possibly future US President Donald Trump sort of announced the allocation of $20 billion to solve this problem. But let's be realists. No amount of money will cancel the physical threat of missile strikes on civilian vessels. Money does not work as an anti-missile shield. That is exactly why marine traffic in this area has collapsed catastrophically. The decline is around 98%. Literally a couple of ships a day are seeping through the strait, which is a drop in the ocean for the global economy. Naturally, the markets are reacting instantly. The price of oil has already consolidated at the mark of $92 per barrel. And experts unanimously insist, if this blockade lasts for a sufficiently long time, the price tag will inevitably jump even higher. There is no doubt about that. It is a stalemate situation. In principle, just as in the case of the Ukrainian conflict, it would be possible to sit down and reach an agreement very quickly, given the political will. But, judging by the rhetoric, not a single party to the conflict wishes to make concessions and resolve the issue peacefully. So there is a persistent feeling that this Middle Eastern crisis will be with us for a long time. And now, my friends, let us move on to events on our native expanses, to the Ukrainian theater of military operations. And you know here, no matter how you look at it, really good news is coming from the fronts. An event has occurred that can be called significant. For the first time, Ukrainian mass media and official resources, let's call this the Ukrainian side, have confirmed the significant advancement of the armed forces of the Russian Federation to the bed of the Konka River. Moreover, they have de facto admitted the loss of control over the settlement of Primorskoye. So that you understand the scale, Primorsk is not just a hamlet, it is a very large, elongated settlement, essentially an urban-type settlement. It stretches from the settlement of Plavny to the village of Rechna, lying along the Konka River and the coast of the former Kakhovka Reservoir. Now this territory is under the tight and confident control of the Russian Federation. And yes, let's look at the map. From there to the city of Zaporizhzhia itself, less than 10 kilometers remain in a straight line. Reports are coming in that immense activity of Russian unmanned aerial vehicles is currently being observed in Zaporizhzhia itself. Drones are flying, conducting reconnaissance, targeting people in military uniforms, and tracking military vehicles and equipment. By the way, a similar picture is currently observed in Kharkov and Kherson. This is a general trend for large frontline cities. Let's move further along the map. In the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, the situation is also extremely dynamic. The Ukrainian command has concentrated significant reserves here, clearly preparing to launch their own counter-offensive on the northern and central sectors of this front. However, while they were preparing, Russian forces did not sit idly by and continued to methodically advance towards the main defensive line of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, AFU, which runs along the Upper Tersa River. By February 2nd, Russian units managed to take the settlement of Pridorozhnoye completely under their control. This was an important tactical success. However, subsequently, the pace of the Russian Federation armed forces' advance here slowed somewhat and stopped for a time. The reason for this was regular and fierce counterattacks by Ukrainian formations attempting to return lost positions. At the same time, on the southern flank of this same direction, the successes of Russian troops are more obvious. Back at the beginning of the month, they completely liberated and took control of Novukrainka. After that, during several weeks of heavy fighting, Russian assault troops drove Ukrainian militants out of a number of settlements, Tsvitkove, Krynichne, and Horka. And a little later, Russian units seized an extremely important AFU defense node in the settlement of Zaliznikny, which seriously shook the stability of the Ukrainian defense in this sector. Parallel to these events, Ukrainian units attempted a large-scale offensive by February 8th and were able to wedge quite deeply into Russian defensive orders in the vicinity of Ternuvate and Dobropilya. The situation was difficult. However, units of the Russian army did not allow this breakthrough to develop into operational depth. Moreover, they were able to regroup, counterattack, and restore control over part of the previously lost positions near the settlement of Haichur. And by February 24th, they developed this success and even took control of the settlement of Rezvianka. So my friends, let's now analyze in detail the situation regarding the AFU offensive in the Dnipropetrovsk direction. There are certain difficulties here. Ukrainian units managed to recapture part of the settlement of Danilivka and establish a foothold in the western part of this village. This is a tactical success for the enemy, which unfortunately allowed them to straighten their defensive line and gain the ability to control the approaches to Danilivka from several directions at once. Moreover, it is recorded that Ukrainian units have begun to seep through in small groups towards the areas of Yehorivka. Actions here are conducted mainly by sabotage and reconnaissance groups, which are conducting reconnaissance in force, probing the defense of Russian forces, identifying the location of strongholds, and assessing the general fire system before the possible commencement of larger offensive actions. It is also worth noting that Ukrainian troops managed to restore a number of positions south of the settlement of Novo-Oleksandrivka. Thus, they are strengthening their defensive lines here, creating additional defensive depth on this sector of the front. Aside from this, a gradual creeping advancement of their units is recorded in the areas of the settlements of Kalinivska and Berezove. However, one should not think that the initiative has been completely lost. Russian units continue to press and advance in the settlement of Novopodhorodne, and are also actively working in the forest belts south of the settlements. This allows for the expansion of the Russian Federation's zone of tactical control and the gradual step-by-step improvement of the position on this sector of the front. Let's move on to the Pokrovsk direction, which remains one of the hottest. Here, the armed forces of the Russian Federation expanded their zone of control south of Novopodhorodne and are actively pressing Ukrainian formations toward the westernmost outskirts of the village. Russian assault groups are breaking through to the settlement of Serhivka, to which, according to the latest data, less than 1 kilometer remains to go. Russian units are also approaching Novo-Oleksandrivka from the east. True, south of this village, the AFU were able to organize a defense and slow down the Russian advance. Extremely fierce battles are going on right now for Hryshyn. Understanding the complexity of the situation, the Russian command is transferring additional forces, personnel, and armored vehicles towards Pokrovsk to increase the pressure. Now, my friends, let's move to the Dobropilya direction, from where truly good news is coming. Well, firstly, it is worth mentioning the situation in the area of that same Hryshyn. Here, flanks are being pulled up, the front line is being straightened, and forest belts are being taken under control, which is very good in itself as it ensures the safety of the advancing units. Hryshyn is a crucial bridgehead for a further offensive on the city of Dobropilya. The Ukrainian side has not yet officially confirmed the loss of this settlement, and the Russian side is not yet declaring its complete capture, observing caution. But by and large, judging by the dynamics, numbered days remain until the final clearing of Hryshyn from the enemy's presence. There is also fresh and encouraging information west of Rodinske. Russian troops, having essentially finished clearing Rodinske itself, are advancing further west. the advancement covered a distance of approximately 1.5 by 3 kilometers. If you look at the map, this is about 3 squares, meaning a total of about 15 square kilometers of territory has passed under the control of the Russian Federation. And pay attention to an important point. Everything related to the Hryshine area is already in the grey zone. This means that tight control by the Russian army will soon be established here. All this greatly cools the hotheads in the Ukrainian command. After all, until recently, through these gates between Belitska and Hryshine, they constantly threw in their sabotage and reconnaissance groups, which tried to go into the rear, towards Pokrovsk, do some flag plantings there, and film propaganda videos. All this ended sadly for them, but there was activity. Now, however, for about 2 weeks, such attempts have not even been recorded. The loophole is closing. Operational data is arriving from the Kostiantynivka direction. Tactical successes of the Russian armed forces are reported. Our fighters managed to advance west of the settlement of Ilinivka by approximately 1 kilometer, with an actual entry into the village itself from the western side. Ilinivka is a key settlement on the approaches to Kostiantynivka. After its fall, working directly on Kostiantynivka itself will become significantly easier. Also nearby, an advancement was recorded in the southeastern part of the city itself. They managed to advance through the private sector and establish a foothold in the built-up area. News is also coming in that there is an advance in the area of Novodmitrivka. A small but important advance is recorded there in the eastern part of the settlement. There are also successes southwest of Chasiv Yar, specifically in the settlement of Chervon. In general, active assault actions and battles for these settlements are ongoing right now. So what else is interesting? In the Slovyansk-Kramatorsk direction, in the area of Fedorivka II, Russian forces are making active attempts to consolidate in this settlement and form a stable bridgehead here for further actions. Russian armed forces assault groups periodically seep inside the village itself, trying to occupy and hold its southern part. At the moment, the situation there is dynamic. This settlement effectively remains a grey zone. Control over it is unstable and regularly passes from hand to hand. Furthermore, as a result of active offensive actions, Russian troops were able to advance in the Pazino area, improving their tactical position in this sector and expanding the zone of control. So where else were their advances? Let's look at the Lyman direction. Confirmed data is arriving that the armed forces of the Russian Federation have nevertheless completely cleared the settlement of Yarova. The Ministry of Defense declared its transition under our control several days ago, but only today has final information arrived that Yarova is completely cleared of any AFU presence. This is extremely important, as it will secure the settlement of Drobyshev from possible enemy counterattacks from the flank. Systematic clearing of the western part of the settlement of Drobyshev also continues. Regarding Krasny Lyman itself, the situation is without significant changes for now. And to conclude the analysis of the combat operations map, unfortunately, unpleasant information is arriving from the Kupyansk direction. For a very, very long time, no alarming news had come from here. And now the map of the pro-Russian OSINT analyst Divgen records a small but unpleasant advancement of Ukrainian troops in this area. Generally, this area has colossal significance. As I have repeatedly recounted, Ukraine is desperately trying to seize the settlement of Holubivka. The fact is that seizing Holubivka would mean the operational encirclement of the Russian troop grouping located on the right bank of the Oskil River. This river, it flows right here, you see it on the map. The supply of this entire grouping of ours occurs mainly from here, through Holubivka. Attacks by the AFU towards Holubivka have been going on for 2 or 3 months already. So far, they have been fruitless, and currently little suggests that they will succeed in realizing their plan. Especially since they haven't even taken Radkivka, and Radkivka is that settlement which must be seized first and foremost to get through to Holubivka. This is all understandable from a tactical point of view. But nevertheless, such information cannot be ignored. There is this unpleasant enemy advance. Now let's distract ourselves a little from the maps and talk about global politics, which directly influences the course of the conflict. The shift of global attention to Iran due to the flaring war in the Middle East may paradoxically help in negotiations regarding the settlement of the Ukrainian conflict. This was stated by Finnish President Alexander Stubb in his interview in Mumbai during an official visit to India, as reported by Bloomberg. The politician suggested that members of the negotiation groups could work out some compromise solution without unnecessary noise and universal attention while everyone is watching Iran. He also believes that Ukraine could receive a certain benefit from the conflict of the USA and Israel with Iran. But on the other hand, he admits that the crisis in the Middle East is beneficial to Russia as well, primarily due to the sharp spike in oil prices. Additionally, the Finnish president made an interesting statement, saying that the conflict between Russia and Ukraine could have ended much earlier if Kiev had received as many air defense systems as were deployed in the Persian Gulf region in literally the first days of the US and Israeli operation. A week of combat operations against Iran cost approximately $40 billion, Stubb continued. Just think about this figure. This is comparable to the annual expenses of all European countries on aid to Ukraine. In total, since 2022, they have directed 300 billion euros to support Kiev, he concluded. Reuters, citing two diplomats, previously wrote that if the US military campaign against Iran drags on, this could significantly complicate military supplies to Ukraine under the Pearl program. As a result, Kiev may face a critical, fatal shortage of American missiles for air defense systems. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also spoke earlier about the risk of problems with supplies of missiles and air defense systems. He drew attention to the fact that during the aggravation of the war between Israel and Iran in the summer of 2025, supplies had already slowed down. He also did not rule out a scenario in which the USA and Europe might focus entirely on the Middle East, forgetting about Ukraine. At the same time, the settlement of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict is already on the way, believes US President Donald Trump. He made such a loud statement during his speech at the Shield of America summit in Florida. The American leader spoke about the necessity of building new warships. He assumed that against this background, he might be considered a very militaristic president. I am the one who finished 8 wars, and I think another one is on the way, the US president said meaningfully. He added that the United States had already been close several times to achieving peace in Ukraine. However, in the end, one of the parties to the conflict backed down at the last moment. He also complained that the personal hatred between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Vladimir Zelensky is very great, which hinders the process. Along with this, former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, speaking at the Hamburg City Hall, unexpectedly called on European countries for dialogue with Russia within the framework of settling the Ukrainian conflict. Reports the publication Welt. Merkel would like the European Union to act as a military ally of Ukraine, but also to use its diplomatic power. This is about the vital interests of Europe itself. Only by combining military and diplomatic power will we achieve what we want, so that Russia does not win and Ukraine has a free and peaceful future in the status of a sovereign state, said the ex-chancellor. In turn, let me remind you, Russian President Vladimir Putin called any reasoning about a strategic defeat of Russia a strategic mistake. Merkel also called on European countries for solidarity and unity against the backdrop of military conflicts and crises occurring in the world. Europe, according to her, must more than ever take its destiny into its own hands. And let's return to Iran again, as events there are developing with increasing intensity. The USA and Israel are delivering massive strikes on Iran's oil refining infrastructure and its oil storage facilities. An oil refinery in Tehran was burning intensely. By the way, and this is a very important geopolitical moment, 90% of Iranian oil is bought specifically by China. So when an Iranian refinery burns, it isn't just Iranian oil burning, it is a clear and targeted strike on China's energy security. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu stated at night, "We are creating conditions that allow the Iranian people to take their fate into their own hands." Apparently, the logic is the same as in the Gaza Strip. Bomb the country into the Stone Age, destroy infrastructure, steal resources, and then let the survivors take fate into their own hands. Iran did not remain in debt and in turn hit an oil refinery in Israeli Haifa in response to the strike on oil facilities in Tehran. Iran continues to deliver powerful retaliatory strikes, Reports are coming in that a strategically important radar of the American THAAD missile defense system at a base in Jordan has been destroyed. According to available data, the strike landed exactly on the position of the radar station. A direct hit was recorded. This, my friends, is a key element of the US missile defense system, costing about $600 million. This radar was used for the detection and tracking of ballistic missiles at long range. Such is the picture of the world that is taking shape at this moment. The situation is heated to the limit. Fronts are moving, diplomats are making loud statements, and missiles are flying over the Middle East. I will continue to monitor the development of events and promptly inform you about the most important changes. Subscribe, like, take care of yourselves. Ruslan Belov was with you. See you soon.